we have any time. So let's proceed to last presentation. The topic is about chatbots in higher education, teaching assistant, and the pedagogical agents. Okay, it's made by Called Chen from Nanyang Polytechnic. Mr. Chen, please.
Hi, so Mr. Chan, my colleague, unfortunately is busy, but he promises to be online today to help answer questions. So I'm Chris Pang, and he asked me to take over, so I will do my best to do him justice. So our topic today is chatbots in higher education, teaching assistants and pedagogical agents. Hopefully you can hear me fine. So today we'll look at what we have learned from building our own chatbot, and then we'll look at an example as well. Okay, so a little thought-provoking question. I know it's a whole bunch of text there, but what you can find an educator is well-versed in hundreds of languages. It's very tuned in to what learners need and never gets angry, always able to provide support and doesn't get irritated as well, which I sometimes do when students ask me the same questions too often. So I'm human, unfortunately, and can even tell you where to go to, what examples to look at, right down to the seconds in a lecture that you have recorded, and even entertains you and tells you jokes if you have to, and even reminds you of deadlines and give FAQs, and is willing to work for you as long as your computers are running 24/7, year on year, 364 days a year. So this is just a little fun way of telling you what a chatbot can do, rather than give you a list and list and list of things. So essentially, this is what a chatbot can do currently. And of course, we didn't do all this, but it's quite interesting to see that as pedagogical agents and teaching assistants, this is the potential of what a chatbot can do. Shown differently in a visual representation, we see there are three possible branches for chatbots. One, of course, is towards more instructional delivery, and that's where you see teaching assistants and even a teacher coming on board. So robots also makes use of the same technologies that chatbots do in conversational AI. You can also go the FAQs way. And if you think about FAQs, when you ask questions for assessment, it's really nothing more than asking more questions if you think about it. So you can actually go that branch as well towards more question-driven, inquiry-based FAQs. And of course, a lot of people are now looking at the affective domain. Not everything is cognitive. The affective domain, we can look in terms of a study companion, friend that you can provide. So there are many bots that now help deal with learners' depression and even some of the at-risk cases to provide first-round intervention. Of course, you can also be a robo-mentor as well. So is there evidence to prove that all this actually makes sense? There is, actually. Okay, there is. Again, I won't cite all the studies because there's a growing body of work. It's still an emerging topic, but there's a growing body of work. But essentially, I colored them to help you understand where it goes. In the blue circles, these are where they are really more instructional support scaffolders. And typically, the literature tells us that it does two things. It enhances self-regulated learning, so it actually encourages independent learning. And two, they're excellent at giving aid when it's most needed. So the adaptive scaffolding, it does so autonomously, so it's actually quite impressive to do that for hundreds of students simultaneously. Another domain that is quite important is the yellow domain that I colored for you. This is the affective domain I referred to earlier. And this is where they try to build chatbots and pedagogical agents to try to encourage learning. So what's a pedagogical agent then? A pedagogical agent is borrowed from a computer term, from an agent. But in this instance, it is any so-called intelligent agent. It can be a player, it can be a character. Though the literature tells you to be as human-like as possible to reap the most benefits. And it's used often in game-based learning, but increasingly it's now used in AI as well to become a role. I think you saw two earlier examples. One becoming a role of for example, I think the student center or the registrar office who handles admissions. And in the first example, Mr. Sarun, I think Sarun Sen, and then Dr. King recently just shared the one for a social robot that is used for teaching law. And usually you try to those are basically pedagogical agents as well. But it was typically used for game-based learning as computer characters or role-playing characters that learners could do. But effective domain is believed to lead to more meaningful experiences versus if you think about it, clicking through a package e-learning or Googling. The green box has to do more with social agency and motivation and engagement. And the belief here is that because there's a social element, because it's quite natural to have conversations about learning This is what will lead to an increase in motivation and engagement through social agency. So the literature to me has three broad themes. Where Nanyang Poly, Kok Hong and myself have focused on is actually the blue circle. So let me show you our model right now. Okay, so we do have a model that we use. So when you do AI, anything with AI, my recommendation is always create your model. This is critical as a pedagogical evidence approach, because without this, it becomes nothing more than just another chatbot that a personal shopping site might have. So our model, we call it a goal-directed performance model. And the reason why it's performance-based because you must remember we are at Nanyang Polytechnic, where we are an applied learning institution. And a lot of the things we focus on are professional development courses for continuing students, as well as students who are training for vocation. So it has to be quite performance-based for our context that we are in. So we do academic modules, but I would say the percentage is a lot less. Our focus is still largely, and it's always has been training for careers and to support Singapore's economy. So the way we build our chatbot has essentially this approach. There is a goal that they have to do, and I'll introduce you to Sarun in a while. Sarun is a business writing chatbot, helps students write business messages, like emails, posts, and letters and stuff like that. And then you'll provide certain guidance, and then you'll provide some assistance along the way, and then you reinforce learning. So the bot was based largely on reinforced learning in the performance model. And then finally, the performance itself is a check. There's another bot that handles pedagogical supervision. And this is where actually in Nanyang Poly, we created another bot that does nothing but assessment as a testing agent. But to the learners, it's actually no difference. The bot just switches on the back end, and we actually have several agents doing different things. And that's the way we decided to build it, because it was just easier in the long run. And in terms of sequential learning, what we did was to try to mimic e-learning. So all our e-learning content was dumped into the bot, literally dumped. We threw everything in. And there was a sequential pathway which the bot will guide a learner through for the first-time learners. But repeating learners or returning learners can also use any of the boxes you see there in exploratory mode as a chatbot would. So I think you heard about intentions. Here we don't talk about intentions. The model we built is actually not rule-based or FAQ-based, it's actually retrieval-based, also it's generative. What do you mean by generative? The bot will try to figure out the best possible answer based on a large library that fed it. So it's actually generative, and it actually learns on its own as well. So when set it on self-learning mode, depending on how the learners interact, the bot will come up with new questions it learns to answer on its own. So from time to time, you just have to check whether the bot is doing the right things, or the students are not trying to do something strange with the bot. And so it learns different answers that it shouldn't be learning in that sense, or try to answer questions I'd rather not answer at all. Okay, so let me give me an example of what it looks like here. This is an example of a student interaction. It's just screenshot. And you see here, of course, Sarun talking, and later we'll do a quick demo as well. I think it's a good time to do a demo as well. Let me switch to a demo to show you. But let me just take you through very quickly first what I wanted to show you. The goal, of course, is to write a good news message. And of course, you'll see them giving a bit of a guidance here. And then, of course, the examples that people can click on. And then, of course, the students, of course, will not stick to just chatting with the bot on learning matters. Sometimes they do try to write things like that as well. So we see a lot of them happening. So let me go through the actual example of what it looks like. So allow me to just toggle very quickly. And then I'll jump back to this. If I can ever find the screen, that is always a challenge doing this. Okay, here's Sarun. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen right now that shows Sarun. I had earlier typed some responses to just show you what it looks like. And then I'll tell you how we build it and some of the findings we had. So you can see a replication of what Sarun has done here. I just typed in about sales messages, and then it will show some examples. Let me show some examples. Hopefully you can see the examples. Let me just check you're seeing the examples. Yes, you are. So you can see some examples as well. Okay, and let me go back to the screen as well. And then, of course, students can also ask it some personal questions. The bot will try to answer it. And this is where you see the bot trying to learn on its own. So it doesn't get everything right, because I didn't really train the bot to answer mundane or fun questions like this, but it didn't stop the students from doing so nonetheless. So you can key in its own questions as well. For example, some of the new questions which I didn't train the bot in, then it learned on its own. Questions like this, when it tries to figure out what it is. So I didn't train the bot to answer what are negative questions, but the bot figures it out as more users use it, because the question became something which was important. So So it was able to figure out which paragraph from a library that we fed it to basically generate its own answers and questions as well. So it's quite impressive that way. So let me get back to my PowerPoint to show you some of the things that we have done, more things that we have done. Hopefully you're seeing my PowerPoint, and you should be seeing my what we built. Okay, so I think you heard the very first speaker talk about using Dialogflow. Dialogflow belongs to Google. We didn't go with Google. We went with Microsoft, and we used Microsoft's bot framework to build this. It's very similar, and Amazon has Lex as well, and IBM has Watson Chatbot, and there are many models out there you prefer to use one. You can still build one from scratch using Python if you wish to as well, which I don't because it was just too much effort. So the way Microsoft does it is you build a knowledge base, and the advantage of using this is essentially you can throw your entire knowledge base, all your 10, 20, 30, 50 years, even 100 years, if you're assuming that long of knowledge into the bot in a PDF document or Word document. You can also trawl and crawl websites on its own, and it does this automatically, and it gets about 80% right. So the questions will figure out on its own, but you do need to go in and clean it up by what it has seen me done, and you have to clean up a little bit. So with this method, you can actually build a chatbot under a week, which is what we did. As a result, in Nanyang Poly, there are now many chatbots for many modules, and we try to support as many tutors as possible who come to us for aid. And you can also key in your instructional deadlines as well. So using a framework, you can really cut down on development time, and pretty much anyone can do it. So we really look at how lean methods. Lean is a concept for rapid prototyping to find out whether it works, and then of course we're going to test whether it makes sense. And many of these broad frameworks comes with ready-made analytics. But if you want more advanced stuff, I would say you have to build your own. It does come with basic analytics like user rate, what are the logs of the questions, what are the most commonly asked questions. So beyond that, if you want deeper analysis for learning, most of the bot frameworks don't have this. You can pay services as well. Okay, let's look at some of the evidence then. So we tracked a bunch of students using this during COVID-19 circuit breaker period. And this was a boon, right? Because we wanted to have a 24/7 approach and support for learners as a teaching assistant. So we used Chatbot's Pedagogical agent as a teaching assistant during COVID-19. And it was amazing to do that because the students could access it 24/7, even when the tutors were sleeping. So we actually had 3 treatments that you see here. One, we only gave the tutorial guide, you had no access to the board. Second one, so it's a quasi-American setup. We had a chatbot only. The third group, we had both. And we had some data from last round, which were we still had face-to-face classes as comparison. So the interesting thing about, they were asked to complete a simple exercise, write a good news message, and it was a simple email to invite a celebrity guest to an event, which is a very common business thing to be doing, right? That's a very common thing you have to do, right? To invite people to grace an event or give a talk. So students were asked to do that essentially. And what you begin to realize quite quickly is that if you look at the two-tailed T-scores we saw, students which were using the chatbot tutorial guide had significant findings compared to the other groups. Of course, face-to-face was the next most effective, but what's interesting was this. Why did the chatbot and the one with chatbot tutorial have such a huge difference? When I went to ask the students what happened here, the students admitted that they didn't even look at the tutorial guide. And they very quickly realized that by using a chatbot, they were able to complete the exercise much quicker. As a result, I think what has happened is there was increased motivation because they discovered a new way of doing things. So that would mean I have to go back and do an experiment again, because here I think they had increased motivation because they were probably quite pleased with themselves that they discovered a new way of doing something without having to read the 20 to 30 pages that was given to them. And you do know young people don't read. Having said that, I do realize that if you look at my next screen, interestingly enough, students from this group spend the least amount of time completing an exercise. Of course, average time on task is not an important attribute in my view. Students should take as long as they need to complete an exercise if ideal so, but we all know that's not true because everything is time to task, unfortunately. But interestingly enough, what you also realize is that this group had the most number of questions asked. Okay, not all of them are learning questions. Some of them are instructional questions. Some of them are personal questions. But you begin to realize that the level of engagement that occurs. And one thing that the chatbot does beautifully in this instance was, I think it made clear that unless students are interacting with the learning material, they don't really do very well. And Interestingly enough, because of the humanistic aspect versus Googling, you can also Google a exercise, right? A lot of students do that as well. I think there was a little bit more fun, and if you saw some of the students asking weird questions, at the height of the circuit breaker periods, one of the most popular questions was, where can I buy TP, toilet paper? So I didn't want a chatbot to answer that, so I came up with a snarky response, go Google instead on one of the free shopping sites. So it was quite naughty that way. But I began to realize that very quickly, this MOOC has a clear preference with younger learners. And they're very able and very quick and very I think they're very adept, almost digital natives. You might make the argument again in using a chatbot to retrieve information compared to someone older like myself, might be slower. And I might prefer using a tutorial guide because it's just easier that way. But interestingly enough, it showed powerfully how chatbot has a role in today's context. And you need to go mainstream very quickly. And you can, using the approach that we have, you can build a chatbot a week. So you can probably beat 52 in a year in that sense. Yeah. So where do you think chatbots are heading? So last two slides, when the first chatbots first appeared, they were largely virtual conversation partners and agents, and these were normally answering questions, and those were largely rule-based. But I think what we have gone to is now a retrieval-based, generative-based, adaptive personal teaching assistants, and these are now powered by the new technologies on the right-hand side, which is natural language processing. And what I believe the future will be is a multimodal, all-device, human-like avatar chatbot. So chatbot will stop becoming what you see, and we will probably move towards what you see in games, when the chatbot becomes a little bit more human as 3D technologies and 5G becomes appropriate. Right now, it's difficult to do that because imagine trying to stream an actual moving face like ourselves, right? It takes up a lot of bandwidth. So it's not really possible yet. I think with 5G coming online and some of the other XR, extended reality coming online, it becomes really possible quite soon, I think. And to tease you a little bit further, and this is my last slide before we open for questions. Currently, a lot of the way people look at chatbots are keyboards, clicks, and touch. But you think about it, our later versions of Sarun actually has voice input. So those with sighted issues can now voice and talk to a chatbot for learning. And we are trying to see whether gesturing can work as well. And certainly emails and phone calls can be handled by a chatbot as well. Typically, we use the same devices, but I ask you to think about that and throw that out of the window. Anything that can you put a chip on that can have a speaker can have chatbot technology in it. So your toys, your headsets, your watches, your wearables, your clothes, why not your door and your chair? Nothing stopping you from doing true pervasive learning. And typically, we learn to package, curate, and structured data. In a chatbot, you can still do that. That's what we have done. As you see in the little boxes you saw, right? That's the structured sequential approach of teaching students to master content the e-learning way. So we still had that. But at the same time, it can be demand-driven and can do inquiry-based exercises with a chatbot very easily as well. And finally, because it logs everything that is captured, you can actually log and alert this, and this is where you can really do what we call true personalized learning. With that, I will end my presentation and hand it back to the moderator. Thank you so much.
No, so